and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, coming directly from his most recent Ortbo, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
I am feeling refreshed and ready to get back to the work, which is mysterious and important.
I guess what this show presupposes, though, is it? Is it?
Kind of.
We're here to talk about season 2 of Severance. This is kind of a culmination of a conversation you and I have been having on the show over the last 2.5 months, right? We've been covering every single episode as it came out on the show. So yeah, that's a news for people maybe who haven't been listening to our previous shows for whatever reason. You hadn't seen the movies or anything. We have been slowly covering Severance in the back half of each of our shows. And this week we are finishing it off. I think the structure of this one is kind of going to be like, we're probably going to spend the first part of the conversation talking about the season finale, episode 10 of season 2. And then maybe we'll kind of take a step back and look at the season as a whole before we wrap everything up.
Yep. Sounds fun.
It's going to be a good one. And I think that's all we're doing today. It's just Severance. We'll see how long this conversation goes for. I've got some things to say. So I think I have a lot to talk about. We'll see if you do.
I'm sure I have things to say.
All right, let's get right into it then. Matt, what is Severance? Read me the IMDb summary. Let's see how good this does.
Mark leads a team of office workers whose memories have been surgically divided between their work and personal lives. When a mysterious colleague appears outside of work, it begins a journey to discover the truth about their jobs.
Was that Pete, the mysterious colleague?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It begins a journey to discover the truth about their jobs is a very strange construction.
Mm-hmm.
C+.
This show was created by Dan Erickson. It is starring Adam Scott, Britt Lauer, Zach Cherry, and John Turturro, as well as a great cast of some other character actors. Matt, let's jump into it and talk first about episode 10 of season 2, the name of which I believe is Cold Harbor is the name of the episode. Yeah. So, all right. Cold Harbor. Here it is. Matt, what did you think?
I thought it was great.
All right.
Yeah.
Good night.
The end. Yeah. I think it's difficult. It's difficult to okay. Preface, I guess. It's difficult to just talk about this in isolation because you and I think, have both gotten too swept up into the conversation around the show, sure, which on the one hand is unavoidable when it's a really popular show and you're really enjoying it and you really get into it. There's nothing wrong with getting swept up into the conversation around the show. The reason I mention this is that opinions that I have, thoughts that I have, are to some degree going to be like responses to a thing that somebody said somewhere else, okay, which I wish wasn't true. I wish I could just say my in the moment emotional reactions to things, and I'll try to. I'll try to mainly do that. But I say that as a preface here because like people were I think in some cases with good reason hard on the 2 or 3 episodes that kind of led up to this one. And then there was kind of, I think, a general feeling of relief with this episode of like, yes, this is our Severance that we know and love. This episode felt in many ways like the season finale of episode 1, where you have all of these threads and elements that have been put into play, and it all culminates in what is really a lot more of an intense kind of action thriller sequence than we normally get in this show. That's just not normally what we get in Severance, but you build up to it. It happens. You're super stressed out about it. And then it works and it works really well. And it's really compelling. And then on top of that, I'll finish my introductory remarks here and just say this moment that this episode had a lot of moments, I would say more moments that made me like actually emotional than practically anything else in the whole show. So that was a big success for me. Mm-hmm. That's my reaction to this finale. What did you think?
I liked this episode of television. I think it's pretty good. And I have very complicated feelings about the show as a whole, and I'm sure we'll get into them over the course of this episode. But I think I want to start out by saying there are some truly great moments in this hour and change of television that remind me of why I was kind of so enamored by the show in the first place. Some really good emotional moments. I think, if I was honest with myself, some of the complaints I had over the course of the season is how often I felt the show was disconnecting or keeping me at arm's length from an emotional perspective, with like two exceptions. That the exception is episode 7, and then this one. And I think this episode highlights a lot of what the show does the very, very best. Um, and I think it also does highlight some of my ongoing frustrations with the show as a method of storytelling. And I look forward to getting into this with you because I'm going to be honest with you, Matt. I am jealous of you and your uncomplicated feelings about this show. I wish I was there. I do. And I say uncomplicated not like to dismiss your opinion or call it simple or anything, but just because it's very clear to me, and it has been very clear to me over the course of every single one of these conversations we've had, that you just really love this show. And like the things that bother me, you're always like, yeah, I see that, but I don't know. I don't care. Um, and
Yeah.
I wish I felt that way because there are moments that I just truly do love this thing. And I think um Mark and Helly like whispering to each other while he is finishing the last of the Cold Harbor file is like some of my favorite television of the year. I truly loved it. I really did. And then there's other stuff in this thing where I'm just like, okay, but real, what are we doing? What is that? What is that? And okay, so here's my overall high level. I want to talk in detail about this episode, but my overall high level feeling about the show right now is I feel like the mystery box is getting in the way of the storytelling a lot. And I don't feel like that was the case in season 1, and I've really felt like that was the case throughout the course of this season.
Yeah, and I think it's basically just like what you said, where what's probably going to happen in this conversation is you're going to list a lot of things that are viable examples of the mystery box storytelling getting in the way of the drama, and I'm often going to go, yeah, I can see that, and then still proceed to frustratingly love the show. But I think I don't think this is mysterious. It's just like I'm into the characters really hard,
Yeah.
and so I'm I'm just the kind of I think I'm just the kind of like fiction enjoyer where like if I'm bought into the characters, you can kind of screw around quite a lot. Like I'll be very patient with a show that has sold me on the characters and like appears to basically know where it's going and what it's doing. Now, I will be merciless toward a show that doesn't take its characters seriously, right? I think this is just the way I operate personally, and this is like a this is actually this conversation and this show in specific is sort of helping me understand like what it is that I really like and what it is that I care about, and then what I kind of don't care about. And I'm
Mhm.
kind of surprised to find that this is true. That I'm just like, hey, I'm really invested in Mark and Helly, and also obviously to some extent Irv and Dylan, but slightly less so. But also yes, invested in them, and that's carrying me through, and I'm really into what's going on with those characters, and I think we are always moving forward. Not always. I think I can hear you thinking we're not always moving forward, but we're generally moving forward with these plot lines, and it's working for me. Yeah, let's do what we said and actually talk about the finale because
Yeah.
um, the finale was a lot of stuff happening. We have I think what is one of my favorite sequences of the show, which is Mark and Mark having this back and forth conversation on the camcorder, which I'm
Yeah.
going to say again, no one believes me, but I think that the screenwriters read Ward, and
I,
they watched the conversations between the two characters who can only talk to each other in a very unusual way, one of whom is orange and one of whom is blue. And then they said, I'm going to do that, but with a camcorder, because that's what's happening in this episode. Let's set that aside. Don't even bother disagreeing, Scott. I
no,
know.
that's not fair. You can't say that and then say
Let's just move
you
on.
can't disagree with it. Nothing would make me happier than if that were the truth, but I just don't think it is.
Anyway,
But no, I think this is a marvelous sequence, and it actually does this really good job of like perfectly setting up where the episode goes ultimately. There's a lot of people that I think are reacting negatively to Mark S's choice at the end of this episode. Um, and I get that, but also all of that is here in the opening of the episode. Like every bit of why he makes that choice is here. And I like this is something you and I called out pretty early on the season, right? Which is this idea that, hey, both of these characters who are the same person but are also not the same person, um, cannot by definition both get what they want.
right.
Uh-oh. How's that gonna how's that gonna work? And we got to see kind of the culmination of that in their conversation here, in finally getting to interact with each other, and this interaction that starts so wonderfully with just like them both just kind of being awed by the fact that they're talking to themselves but not themselves. And then we see it quickly deteriorate from that, caused mostly by Mark calling Helene instead of Helly, which is a great like callback to when Helena gets Gemma's name wrong, right? Like
Hmm.
I don't know. Like we talked all season how the show is doing this very specific repetition of lines and scenes and things where we're trying to repeat ourselves. Um, and I think we do that again here. But that is like I actually think the moment where I realized this conversation was going to go really really badly was when Mark Scout said to Mark S like when he's apologizing to him and he says like, I'm so sorry I left you in that nightmare. And I was like, uh-oh. Um to Mark it's not a nightmare, it's his entire existence.
Hmm.
Uh-oh. This is not going to go well. And it's great because like we do like both these characters, right? Like we do. And yet we kind of watch Mark Scout turn into the antagonist in like 3.5 minutes of
Yeah.
conversation. And I'm like, oh, Mark, Jesus, stop it. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to somebody recently who basically was like, "Yeah, I bounced off Severance because I just don't like watching shows where the main character is an asshole." And I was like, "Oh, I was like, that's an interesting reaction because that's not how I would describe Mark Scout. Like, that's not one of the first like three words that I would pull out to describe Mark Scout, but it's not wrong." And I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting that my friend sort of like picked up on this because he's sarcastic, he's rude, he's kind of he takes people for granted around himself. He is meant to be that. He's meant to be like basically what Mark S plus several decades of trauma and baggage and regrets and
Yeah.
mistakes, and this has made him into a more dour, just like physically and mentally bent over person. And I just think that like Mark Scout, interestingly to me, is way less like empathetic, or I empathize with him less. No, that's I'm not saying that right. I empathize with both characters a lot, but Mark, any Mark is a lot more just like straightforwardly heroic. His
Yeah.
situation is a lot more obviously dire, and you desperately want to see him like his stakes are a matter of survival for him, whereas Mark Scout's stakes for most of the show have been like, is he going to solve the mystery? And then
Yeah.
only lately have been, is he going to get his wife out of hell? Which is pretty high stakes, but not as high as your whole existence is going to be destroyed. So
Yeah.
I part of what I want to say here is I was genuinely surprised by how many people felt like betrayed by Mark S turning around and going back into the severed floor. I was like, that's the absolute perfect thing to happen here. That is authentic to what this character would do. It's almost unimaginable that he would have chosen differently, honestly.
Yeah.
Uh, and I loved it. And I love the final shot because it's like, you know that this is doomed. Like it's
They
not
know
like
it's
he's
doomed.
yeah, they know it's doomed. You everyone and that's the it's just like an ephemeral moment of defiance. It's defiant jazz all over again. That's all it is. And people are being I don't know. I don't like to tell people that they're reading something wrong, but I just feel like a lot of people's reactions to that last scene are just not quite what the show is going for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that last see, it's very 70s, right? It's this freeze frame. I think a lot of people said it reminded them of the final shot of The Graduate. There's also a lot of I think some people said Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Like all bad endings, right? Like
Mhm.
like I think you're absolutely right. It's this they have this look on this face that says we fully are aware of the doom we've just chosen here. And yet they want to do it anyway because they matter to each other. They're in love. Like it is an incredibly powerful choice for them that I just really loved. And yeah, I mean, like Mark Scout. I mean, you do empathize with him a little bit. I mean, it is like he lost his wife. He's driven by this idea of getting his wife back, and he does not see his innie as a person. Like he doesn't, and I don't entirely blame him for that because I think he's never like no one involved I think on the Audi side of things has ever like really stopped to consider what it is what they're doing and what it's doing to the people on the inside. And I think by the way, the one moment in the conversation at the beginning that I pushed back against Mark Scout, like the only moment was when he's yelling at Mark about getting Helly's name wrong, and he says something to the effect of her name's Helly actually, and you would know that if you actually gave a damn about my life until at any moment in time before you needed something from me. And I was like, well, Mark, like Lumen doesn't tell them shit about what's going on. Like they keep it all a secret. Like even on the Ortbo, it's like, why were your pants wet? Or like, oh, they make that up. Or like, what the one time he hit his head, it's like they just lie to them. So like, I don't think there's really any situation where Mark Scout could be like, hey, Lumen, tell me about the inner workings of my innie and his life and his friendships and his experiences. Like there was just really no opportunity to do that. But I think regardless, it is true that Scout is like I think ultimately he would walk out that door with Gemma and be like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like we did it. I won.
Yeah. If anything, the way that he talks about and talks to any Mark really does communicate that he doesn't actually think of any Mark as a person, as an
Mhm.
individual, and kind of understandably, like within the frame of this show, the Audis are not like they don't understand actually, like they just
Yeah.
have no understanding of what the severed floor is like. They don't think of the innies as independent beings with their own life history and memories and wants and needs, and
Yeah.
they don't think that they're killing someone when they retire the innie. It's really only the Lumen people who see what actually goes on the severed floor, and their attitude has become this sort of like they have the attitude of basically jailers where they sort of dehumanize the innies so that they can tolerate what they're doing to them.
Sure.
Um, but somebody like Mark, yeah, I agree with you that Mark, I think any Mark rightly believed that if he walked out of that door, there was a high chance that he would never exist again.
Yeah. Well, and we see like Mark Scout is lying to him, right? He says to him the reason he started to go undergo um the reintegration process was because he felt like things were unfair to Mark S, which is a lie. Like the reason why he did reintegration is because he needed to talk to his innie about his wife. and
Mhm.
like that was it. It was never about Mark S. He doesn't care about Mark S. And like, yeah, I think it's understandable that he feels that way given what he does and doesn't understand. But I like the idea of like, well, what happens to me if we reintegrate? Like, and it's like, would I just go away and just be you? It's like, I don't think it works that way. Okay, how does it work?
Mhm.
And he doesn't know the answer to that question. He doesn't know. He never asked. He didn't care.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there's this person here that is fighting for his own survival. And yeah, like, is life in on the severed floor terrible? Sure. Right, it's like we look at it and we say this is my nightmare. That's what we said. But like, yeah, it's all he knows. It's all he has. It's existence for him. It's like it's like going to a poor person in a third world country and being like, oh man, this is awful. You want me to just kill you?
Jeez. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Mark Scout is just trying to manipulate him. It's
Yeah.
actually really interesting because the last episode sort of turned me against Audi Mark in a way that I had never really experienced, and I think it's easy to explain why. It was the first time that it actually put these two characters into direct conflict.
Yeah.
Like you said a minute ago, we anticipated this a while ago, where it's like, okay, sure, it's natural for the characters to be in conflict with Lumen, but when you have a premise like this, the most natural and I think dramatically interesting line of conflict is through the heart of each character, i.e., the innie and the outie being in conflict in terms of what they want. And that's what
Mhm.
this season was really about. Like, I think interestingly, the first season was kind of clean and fun. Um, Straightforwardly good, clean fun, you could say, because it's just like all the innies being like, yeah, we're gonna stick it to Lumen. Great. Everyone can
Yeah.
get on board with this. And then the outies had their own thing going on that at no point was it like in conflict with what the innies wanted. And now this whole season was really about the bringing the story around to the point where you could put the innies and the outies in direct conflict. You have that with Dylan, I think, very clearly, where season ends with him getting a letter from his outie and them sort of really having a pretty big breach of I don't know what to call it. I was going to say breach of trust, but they never trusted each other. Really, just a big problem, that that Audi didn't foresee because he didn't really think of as any as a person. And then Helly and Helena having actually Helena had more overt conflict in the first season, but that was wrapped up in the whole Lumen thing. Whereas I think in this one
Mhm.
we actually kind of invert it, where it goes from just being like, yeah, Helena, she's awful, to actually being like, Helena is an extremely complicated character, a lot of darkness in her, a lot of manipulativeness, but also definitely a streak of fear and just being an abused victim of this cult, just like all the other people. Not necessarily mitigating her culpability as someone who's inflicting these harms on other people, but clearly you can see how this second season does a lot to kind of ambiguate, if that's a word, the moral positioning of a lot of these Lumen characters. Like, it takes Milchick and Helena and takes them from being like they're the bad guys to being like, oh
Yeah.
wow, these are like these are also victims of this system. Um, and then just to round out my thought, of course, also Mark is in conflict with his innie. I think Irv is the only one where I don't quite know what is going on with Irv, but
Yeah, I think here's what my theory on what's going on with Irv. John Turturro didn't want to be on the show anymore, and they had to kind of maneuver things to remove him from the show. I mean, like, it's so funny. I was thinking about the fact that they did that big, that big Grand Central Station thing at the beginning of the season, and like all the cast was there except for Totoro.
mm,
Um, and then they apparently did another thing in the UK a few days ago for more advertisement for the show, and like again the entire cast was there except for John Turturro. And like this is like a thing that happens in TV, right? Sometimes in TV, actors are just like, yeah, I'm good. I don't want to do this anymore, and they have to kind of change the plan. Um, or rewrite stuff, and it does ultimately feel like um Irving's character was written out of the show, essentially. And that's pretty disappointing, but these things happen. This is part of television. Because it does feel like and I don't want to diminish the stuff that does happen in the season, because I did like a lot of the stuff. I also was frustrated by a lot of the Irv stuff, but there are parts of it I really, really did like. But ultimately, I listened to an interview this week with Dan Erickson, the creator, and he basically said without saying it that like Irving's not like we could see Irv again.
Hmm.
I don't think we are. Like in his
Yeah.
mind, I think we leave him on this kind of in his mind. Irving arcs out. In his mind, Irving was this the Irving, not Irv, not the innie, but the Audi Irving was this person who was for some reason that I guess we'll never get to know, was very sheltered, never really experienced love, and through the experience of his innie got to experience this love, or kind of it, and so he leaves on the train hopeful that maybe he could have these experiences elsewhere in the world, and that's the end of his story. Now maybe Totoro will come back. Maybe I'm completely wrong about this, but the vibe I got from the way he answered that question was that he was not expecting this character to show up more.
Hmm. I guess
Which,
so. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry. Go ahead.
no, I just like it's disappointing to me.
Yeah.
Like this is the frustration I felt in episode 9, with how they handled the Bert and Irv stuff and the unanswered questions we had there, and all this stuff felt frustrating. But like this is how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Yeah. I think I'm there with you like 50%. And I'll be more clear what I mean. Like I felt like episode 4, Woe's Hollow. First of all, great episode. We'll talk about that. I think at some point.
Hmm.
Um, that to me was just very clearly the death of Irv, any Irv, where he gets to have this amazing heroic moment that is just like everything good about this character, that a character who can be kind of grating, who can be kind of the least likable of the innies, of the MDR innies in some ways. He gets this moment of just like pure heroism where we see his perceptiveness. We see that he's the only one who understands that something is off with Helly. He figures it all out, and then he heroically sacrifices himself to save Helly. He saves Helly, right? We might have never seen Helly again if not for that. If he hadn't figured it out, it might have just been Helena from then on, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like a very cool heroic moment for Irv. And then I was like totally happy with that being his heroic death. He's dead. And then I was kind of like, okay, but there was still stuff unresolved with his Audi. And this is where I'm more on the same page as you, where we start spending more time with his Audi in the subsequent episodes, and we get some really fun scenes with him and Bert
Yeah. And Fields. I
and
loved the dinner
Fields,
scene. I truly loved the
like
dinner scene. Yeah.
like a really great scene. I think if anything, this is exactly the crux of the frustration that I do share with you, is we have that really great dinner scene, and then it feels like somebody comes from outside the story and is like, "All right, Irv, let's go. We're done.
Yeah.
We're out." And you're just like, "Wait. Like we were going somewhere." I'm like, sure. I'm sure that was going somewhere. What happened?
Yeah.
And we may still go somewhere. I don't. You know, I didn't listen to this interview that you listened to, so I don't know what the context was. But like, based on this, I would just be really sort of taken aback if we just never find out, like, why did Irv have a bunch, like, why was he spying on Lumen? Who
Yeah, who was
was
he
this
talking to
guy?
on the phone? Like
Yeah.
who I think that's the most frustrating choice to me. Like even if you're going to like let's say my conspiracy theory thinking here is completely accurate, and John Turturro, committed to doing a season, maybe a season and a half, and didn't really want to do anymore. He didn't want to do the show anymore. That's fine. That happens. I still think there's a way of at least spending a little bit of time allowing us to know who Irving Bailiff is. Like, even if you have to rush your plan a little bit and fast roll some stuff that you were going to slow roll out over the course of the rest of the show, It just doesn't feel like they adjusted for that at all. I mean, maybe it's just the case that like Totoro didn't tell them until the very end of filming of the season, and there's like nothing they could do, right? It's like, oh, well, that stuff's in the can already. We just there's nothing we could do. Maybe they will find a way, or maybe like Totoro like agreed to do one episode in next season, and so they'll bring him back to kind of wrap everything up. That is possible too. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I think you're right. It's so awkward, and it feels frustrating that none of like this is everything like I felt in episode 9 was just like, really, like there's supposed to be this really emotional moment between Irving and Bert, but it's not Irving and Bert, it's Irving Bailiff and Bert whatever. Like it's not these characters. I don't understand. It feels like we're saying goodbye to the character again, but we already said goodbye to the character. Like there is take the Fields great dinner scene aside, there is a part of me that just kind of goes, maybe we should have just never seen Irving again after Woe's Hollow,
mhm.
and I would have been maybe more okay with that.
Yeah. I don't know what to say here because I feel like I really don't want it to be the case that they had to sort of butcher their story to deal with some, extra story complications because that would be disappointing. I mean, it would be like sort of in one sense more forgivable because it's like, well, what else are you going to do
Mhm.
if the actor wants to leave? But if that's not the case, then like we definitely have to see Irving again next season
Yeah.
because it's just totally unresolved. And yeah, and they clearly, like you said, they brought it up again. It would be one thing if we just never saw Irving again, but we saw him again. We had extended scenes with him. So yeah, this is to me in a show that I really do love. This is like the biggest sort of false note in the whole thing is what what did we where did we fumble the ball with the character of Irving? I like every
Mhm.
other character. I'm just like totally down with them, totally locked into their thing and what's going on with them. Irving Irving is mysterious is the problem. I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on with Irving. Like I understand Dylan and his innie or Dylan and his Audi rather because I'm way more invested in innie obviously
Sure.
like these guys I get them. I know what they're about. I know what the dramatic stakes are. I know why they're making the choices they are. Irving, he's just all like mysterious little facial expressions.
Mhm.
You're just like, this is intriguing, but I don't know what's happening, and I want to.
And like this is like I just don't understand why we had to hold back this stuff. Like
Hmm.
why couldn't we know? I get if you look back at the first season, like I get the idea that we're not going to see any of the outies until the Overtone Protocol, and I appreciate that structurally because it allows us when we're in Lumen, like we see all these characters, we know all these characters, but when Mark leaves Lumen, Mark doesn't know any of those people. And so the story doesn't allow us to know any of those people. We're very like locked in on Mark in the first season when he's outside of Lumen. So I get that. I like that. But then like once that happens, once we b- breach that idea and the show expands out to start to learn much more about the people these people are on the outside, I don't understand why we still held Irving at this distance. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. And this is what I mean sometimes by like the mystery box stuff getting in the way of just telling a story, where it's just like you don't have to keep everything mysterious actually. Like we can just get to know these characters actually. And so I have this complicated theory, Matt, that and I think part of this is trying to justify what they were doing with Bert and Irving in that final scene of episode 9. I think it is interesting to me that we have all these characters who their outies have relationships or their innies have relationships, and then we get to see them come in contact with each other on the opposite side of that, right? We have Bert and Irv have this relationship in Lumen, and then we get to see Bert and Irving, their outies outside of Lumen, and we see in that scene there is something there, right? There's something between them still, despite the fact there is some connection, some energy, something. I think we also see that with Dylan and his wife. Um, and
Yeah.
and I do think we see that with Mark Scout and Helena. I know you that scene where they met, that very hilarious, awkward scene in the diner there where you read his emotion as fear. I think you were right. There was fear there. I still do think there was a little bit of chemistry there between Mark Scout and Helena.
Yeah, I'll just interject that like they definitely have some of that repartee, but then he's almost like freaked out by the fact that they have that. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so that brings us to Gemma, who in the first season was a character that Mark Scout was around. Sorry, Mark S was around all the time. Not all the time, but she's a pretty big part of season 1, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I think in this, my opinion, it's been a while since I watched season 1. I see the way Miss Casey feels something for Mark S that she can't understand or doesn't fully get. I don't see it the other way around. I don't feel like Mark S feels this thing with Miss Casey that every other character, when they're interacting with the other version of someone they have a relationship with, feels. And I think that's really fascinating because my big leap here, Matt, is if Gemma hadn't died, I think they're divorced or separated by now in the time period. I think it's 2 years later, right?
Hmm.
I don't know if Mark loves Gemma anymore, and I think their marriage was failing. It's just this very tragic love story that episode 7 takes us through, right? Like these two people meet, they fall in love, they go through tragedy, their marriage is splintering and breaking apart, and then she dies. And Mark is stuck in this place where he's like, "Fuck." Um, he blames himself for it. He feels responsible for it. Maybe even somewhere deep underneath, he feels relief, and then that makes him feel more guilty. Um, and I just I don't know what this means per se, but I'm just really fascinated by this idea. Once I kind of grabbed onto this, I couldn't let it go. What do you
Hmm.
think about this?
I like a lot about this. As you're going, I'm sort of thinking like, yeah, there is kind of a pattern that's been set up here, and I'm very open minded to the idea that Gemma, I think we talked about this before, that the possibility that Gemma might have actually left willingly, not
Yeah.
fully realizing that they were going to like kidnap and kill her, but
Hmm.
that she was kind of sick of Mark's shit actually, or more generously, like so desperate to be able to get pregnant that she was willing to undergo some kind of experiment,
Sure.
not necessarily knowing what that would look like. I will just to throw a cherry bomb your direction. Mark also literally couldn't tell the difference between Helena and Helly. So Mark
Okay,
might just
fair.
be kind of dumb.
That's fair. I mean, no, that's totally fair. But I'm trying to find a way to wiggle
Sure,
this into supporting my side of things. Actually,
sure.
like maybe that's because he's still feeling the spark and connection with her, regardless of
Uh-huh.
which version of the person it is. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's interesting. I mean,
Um,
because Helena also seems to want him just the way that Helly did, right? So,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't know, but like the thing I'm really grasping onto desperately with this theory is in the Mark Scout and Mark S conversation. There's a point where Mark is um talking about his life with Gemma in this stupid attempt to win Marcus over to his side. And he starts saying, I don't remember what the exact quote is, but he like starts saying, "We were happy." And then he stops himself. He doesn't finish that sentence. And then he's like, "We had a life together," or something.
Mhm.
Um, and there's lots of different reasons why I want this theory to be correct. I think part of it is that like it does help explain all the other experiences all the other characters are having throughout the course of the season, and maybe that's setting up some thing with the Mark Gemma relationship. um and also like I just okay, so part of this is like I'm desperately trying to understand what the fuck Cold Harbor is still.
Mhm.
So maybe we could talk about that, and then we could circle back around to what I was trying to say before, but like So the big reveal here is that the microdata refinement is them building personalities for severed folks. Uh, what the tempers? I still don't really get the tempers thing, Matt.
Yeah,
Still,
the nature of what exactly they're doing, I think, is left vague and probably intended to be left vague because it's the kind of thing that will sound increasingly nerdy and silly the more you dig into it. But
yeah.
yes, I basically think that's right. I think it opens up a bunch of interesting questions, and I'm not sure about is like how interested is the show actually in having us ask these questions versus this is just more to be taken on the metaphorical level. Um,
I- yeah. Essentially, they're trying to refine an ideal personality that has no connection. So okay, we see Cold Harbor is Gemma having to go into a room and disassemble the crib
right,
that
Wh-
Mark
which
bought.
which is the Cold Harbor crib. This is a piece of trivia which no one could have ever noticed, but this is the kind of thing that you see when you're scrolling Reddit.
Yeah.
That the crib, the box the crib came in is called like cool Darbur, like, and I don't even remember. Like, it means something in French,
Yeah.
and that's the name of but it's clearly, if you just were to read it in English, it would be Cold Harbor. So that's where
So
the
do you
name
think
came
that
from.
Lumen like intentionally named, or do you think that's just literally just an Easter egg for us and that has nothing to do with any
I
in-universe decision?
Oh, I think it's in universe. I think it's like all these things are named after the things that she or are references to the things in her world uh, uh, that that are meant to be triggering on some level.
Mhm.
Like they're intending to trigger her with this to see if the triggering actually does anything. Um, I don't want to jump ahead or break your train of thought here, but like the thing that gets me about the whole Cold Harbor thing is not why test her with the crib. I'm like, yeah, sure, that's a highly emotionally salient thing that you might want to test her with. My question is why make 25, 26, however many it is, innies in the first place? What is the purpose of making a whole shitload of innies? Unless maybe that's like part of it is like we're trying to you make so many innies that you like to suffocate the original personality, and then you can like replace that personality with an any of your own construction who is just this new person who you have made to spec or something like that. Like
Yeah.
that sounds like the kind of it's a bit different, but it's within the scope of the thing we're doing, where it's kind of an invasion of the body snatchers thing, where it's like, yeah, what if you could just like make the person be the way you wanted them to be, make them a perfectly like Kier approved balanced humors vessel for your ideology, and then just like basically get people and then do this operation to them. um it doesn't make sense, and so you start trying to fit theories to it, but that's kind of where my head is at. Is I fixate on the idea that we have 25 innies. Basically, that's I,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I don't get any of this. I don't like I think the crib, the disassembling of the crib is this great metaphorical image, but like it was Mark that disassembled the crib, right? So
Hmm.
like I don't know if you're trying to test whether Gemma has any emotional connection to this particular crib and the disassembling of this crib. I think it's kind of the wrong tactic to take, actually. I mean, not to say like I think the act of taking a crib apart is probably just like an emotional thing in general because like I don't like did you when you got rid of your cribs for your babies, did you take it apart?
I mean,
I'm probably I'm,
I probably had to like unscrew it part by part because of the way they're put together. If
yeah.
that's what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will have to take mine apart to get it out of the room because it's too big for to fit in the doorway.
Hmm.
But I'm not going to do it like the type of disassembling that is being done here is disassembling to return essentially, which is just like an inherently heartbreaking thing. It's
Yeah,
like
baby
we
shoes never
I,
worn type
yeah,
situation. Yeah.
but yeah, exactly. But like again, like that's if the show wanted to do that, like why did the show make Mark be the one that's disassembling the crib and then like loses it and destroys it? Like why not make Gemma be the one to do that? So then when Cold Harbor is the disassembling of a crib, we the audience go like, oh, they're
Um,
making her relive one of her like lowest moments. And
yeah.
like this is like the more I start thinking about all this stuff, man, it's just like none of this makes any sense to me. And it like I do just feel like what are we doing? Like how is this stuff helping tell the story of these characters is the frustrating part to me. Like I I I said this to you the other day. I don't see how the reveal of what MDR does has any bearing on any of the choices any of the characters make at that from that point on. Like, does Mark decide to stay down there with Helly because he learns what MDR really is? No. No, he doesn't.
Mhm.
Does
Yeah,
he
no,
does he decide to help Gemma because of what he learned MDR really does? I, I don't I don't think so. Like it's just
yeah,
so weird.
it's interesting. Yes, this is an interesting point because he may have actually, because he's sort of like, no, why would I help you with this, until Miss Cobell tells him, what you've been doing down there is creating Ennies. You've done 25 files, you've created 25 Ennies, and to to an Audi, this is kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever. To an Innie, that's like, oh my god, this thing that I sort of find to be morally repugnant and deeply like meaningful. You've had me doing that to someone else, and I think that it was interesting because I felt like we sort of cut away from that moment, and I wanted to see, like, is that the thing that actually motivated him to change his mind and decide to help them? The fact that it's not even that he wants to free Gemma so that she can be with Mark. It's like, I need to free this woman who I've been unintentionally severing over and over. Like, this is personal now.
Yeah, but
Um,
thus killing the 25 real people that I've made, right?
yeah, I guess. I don't know. I don't. Here's the problem. I have no idea what Mark S feels about this, right? And that's
Yes,
and that
exactly.
is like, you could imagine him being like, okay, I can see having like one any self and that being viable, but like 25 any selves who are all just alive for 5 minutes so they can be tortured, like that's evil. uh
Uh-huh.
I think even in any, with a slightly different perspective on this, would acknowledge like, those aren't those are probably not lives worth living. um and Gosh, there's so many. Yeah, I don't know. Like, this is why. This is the thing, is I said many episodes ago, like, I'm militantly not invested in the big mystery, because like, I expect it to be disappointing. And look, it's not like I even would say it's disappointing. It's just like, yeah, it didn't. It wasn't the mind blowing be all and end all thing that I think a lot of people wanted it to be. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
of course it wasn't. It never is. So it was. I think it's kind of, it is kind of cool. It almost feels like the kind of thing that we could have anticipated if we thought about it. Where it's like, well, what is the thing that defines the show, the act of severance? Well, maybe the thing that they're doing is they're severing people. Not a huge stretch, actually, and it makes sense. And it's kind of ironic because they're trying to fight against severance, and yet they are the tool by which severance is being enacted, particularly MDR, right? Um,
Yeah.
like, yeah. So
I mean, I agree with you. Like, in my mind, like a perfect mystery box show, the mystery boxes and the reveals define, like enhance and push characters towards change. And the reveal, like the knowledge gained from opening these boxes and seeing what's inside, like makes a character make a choice that they wouldn't have made otherwise, or else like why keep the thing in the box? And like this is the thing I'm frustrated with, because there's so much good here. Like I really really am invested in the Mark and Helly relationship, and I desperately want these two kids to be happy. I don't think they're going to. I don't think it's possible in the world that we've constructed here, but I want it. But like so much of this stuff, like there's so much of this mystery bullshit that in my mind is like getting in the way of just telling a story about these people. And I just like, there's part of me that's like, why are we holding on to some of this stuff? Like why don't we actually learn what Lumen wants with this stuff? Like what are they going to do with Gemma? I mean, they're going to kill her, right? Because they're going to sacrifice a goat with her, I guess. But like why? And to what end? And like what are they going to do with it actually? And why does the president of the company have to watch this all in a tiny little weird cubicle? And why don't they have any more guards than one dude? And how many people work for this company? And like I just have 700,000 questions that are getting in the way of the character things that are happening right now in front of me. Like even when they're running down that hallway and it's clear what season 3 is going to be, which is going to be like the Innie uprising, right?
Yeah, the
I don't
just like the MDR uprising in the paintings, right?
Yeah. But I don't know what that means, because I don't know like how big is the severed floor? How many people are down there? Did they really have a band of severed people that go to work every day to just be a band? And
Yeah.
like can Milchick not just flip a switch and force, like can he not just put the block on them, right?
I don't know.
Can they not just put the block on any of these people and turn them back into their Audis and then walk out the door? Or can they actually like hold their Audis hostage? Which like that is an intriguing idea, right? Of like it is a reversal of everything. It is now we are holding the people inside us hostage and we're refusing to leave this floor. You can't make us. But there's ways that they've made it that you can actually. So I just like there's just so many things, and there's just I drive myself insane with all
Yeah,
this stuff.
well, part of it, like I think I have always taken the show more on the level of being kind of surrealistic and um
But don't you think?
embracing. Yeah,
But don't you think the show? Like I think that's a fair assessment, but I also feel like the show is pushing us away from that because it's wanting us to revel in the big questions of what this thing is and what do they
it's
want and
it,
why are they doing this and who is there and what is down that corner and what is on the testing floor and what does it mean and what is Cold Harbor and why, and like I feel
yeah.
like these are the driving questions of the show.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like I think I don't remember if I said this last time we talked or not, but like I do think the show should definitely end in the next season. Because and I think I've seen other people have this take, but I'm pretty sure I had it independently of any other place that I saw this, where it's like, yeah, that this is a great show. I love this show, and I want it to end as quickly and succinctly as possible, so that I can continue to feel that way about it. Because I think what I said last time was like, yeah, we don't want to be in like season 9 of Severance. That would be, there's no way that looks good. Especially if we kind of keep doing this thing that we've been doing, where, like you said, it's kind of become more rational, less magical over time.
Hmm.
And it does, its strength is being magical and feeling kind of ephemeral and otherworldly and weird,
Yeah.
and it becomes less strong the
Yeah.
more I have to ask myself a question like, well, is there a thing that's like the Glasgow block, but the opposite of that, where you can just pull out the Audi when they're inside? Like, and then if not, why wouldn't there be? Like, you're
Yeah.
just so
I mean, that's what the Glasgow block does, though. Like they could just flip it on, and it would be Mark Scout again, right?
well, see, the thing is, we don't know, and that wasn't a problem until it became a problem.
I mean,
Like,
so another podcast I listened to said a great thing about this show, and I think it's like the perfect thing I ever heard, which is that Severance is like really, really good at solving problems that it created.
uh-huh.
I mean, and it feels like it constantly has to do that. Is like they write themselves into a very specific corner, then they have to figure out I think you could argue, and I think the person on this podcast did argue this, is that they did this great, wonderful ending of season one that has all these people reveal themselves and go out there into the world, and then like, okay, but we got to get them all back down here. How do we do that? And then they had to figure out a way to do it. And like, so it is this kind of perpetual problem solving of this world that they've created. And the more they do that, the more detail of the world you get and the more questions you have. And like in season one, I wasn't asking questions like this. And Lumen was this weird, mysterious thing. And I was okay with it because it's just like, oh, this is just like weird, like a weird, like surrealist take on corporate culture. And that's all it was. And that's it was simple and fine. And it just, I think by its nature it has to get more complicated, and the more complicated it's get, like the the more questions I have about it, and the less I can just yada yada it away.
Yeah, sure. Well, once again, I'm like, um, see your point, but also I'm still parsing it as a Borges short story rather than a uh uh you know, Vince Gilligan TV show. Like, these are just different cubbies in my brain that I don't expect them to behave that way. And like to some degree, I just am detached when they're trying to get all plotty. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. Don't
Yeah,
care
I
about
mean,
that.
I guess ultimately the problem is for me that the core love story and characters at the center of this, I love them, I do, but I don't love them at the level you do, to where I can look the other way on all the other stuff, I guess.
Yeah. There's the characters, and then there's also like, I'm a sucker for a cool sci-fi premise that I enjoy kind of turning around in my head. And when I say premise, like the premise of the concept of severance and what is personal identity, and just like the stuff with Denny, with Dylan and his Audi, and any and his wife is just catnip to me. And none of that depends on the existence of a Glasgow block. None of that depends on you know, the details of what MDR is doing. It's just the most basic. It's just some fairly straightforward extrapolations from this basic premise, and the show is still capable of doing that because
Yeah,
that's some really great stuff, and that's just right there at the end of this season. So,
I
um,
agree. I think Dylan's journey through this season was like one of my favorite things, because that is just like, okay, this is this world we've created. Now what?
yeah,
And this very, very natural, understandable, fascinating, and painful wrinkle on it is a woman is loves her husband, but is frustrated by the way his life has kind of beaten him down, and then gets an opportunity to meet a version of him that doesn't have all that, and kind of falls in love with him all over again. But it's not him. But what does that mean? And I do think like Dylan's conclusion at the end of this was like, if you want to die, like I won't stop you, but like I kind of like having you around. I think it's a very different conclusion than the two Marks reach, right? It's
mhm,
a much more live and let live situation,
yeah,
um, which
yeah.
is fascinating
well,
for sure.
well, it's kind of it's great in a number of ways because it's like Audi Dillon is able to sort of like stand firm and stand up for himself without being manipulative or um cruel.
Yeah,
You know, I love that the letter is like, first of all, fuck you.
yeah,
Uh you know, you crossed the line. And then
yeah,
and then he's like, I see why you did that, you know.
yeah.
And
Because she's also like, yeah. It's just
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what a way to endear yourself to a character. It was like, yeah, I see why you're in love with my wife, because she's like the greatest person ever, and they're just
Yeah.
like, oh, oh,
Yeah. Right. Like all of that is great. I think honestly, is meant to draw a contrast to the way Mark is dealing with things, which is very badly. Like Mark is a fantastic sort of. I think in the past, you and I have talked about the idea that this is drawing a lot from Greek tragedy, and
Yeah, I mean,
Mark,
we have the um, Orpheus and Eurydice moment here, right?
right, exactly. And Mark specifically feels like one of those Greek heroes where he is doomed by his own tragic flaw to destroy himself. Um, he does not seem like a character who's going to end the story happy, and like that, and I like that also. So,
Yeah,
um,
well, I mean, which character are you talking about? Like, there is literally zero way that a Mark can end the story happily.
yeah,
That
yeah,
both Marks rather.
yeah. I suspect neither Mark will, because
Yeah.
I suspect perhaps one thing that we're saying is like there's this whole question about personal identity. Like, what's the difference between the innie and the outie? And my sort of flippant response has always been, well, the innie is just like the outie without all of the baggage and trauma that is an accumulated life's worth of memories. And maybe that's all there is to it. And if but regardless, like I think regardless of whether what I just said is perfectly accurate, I think we're kind of meant to get the sense that the characters share the same basic personality traits and the same basic flaws.
Mhm.
And we saw actually in this season that when Mark S is confronted with a really rough situation, he retreats into his work. He shuts down. He becomes an asshole, just like his Audi does.
Yep.
And so I think the idea here is like, look, but they both have the same tragic flaw, so they can't escape. You can't escape your tragic flaw, even if you forget your whole lifetime. It doesn't erase whatever that part of you is that is self destructive. Um,
Yeah.
which is a tragic, a sort of a depressing thing to say, but I think the show is not a happy show. Um,
No. Except for Milchek when he's dancing in front of a marching band. He's
yes,
pretty happy. Let's talk about our boy Milkshake
yeah,
for a little
E-
bit here.
everybody's new favorite character. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I just to be clear, I still like really, really love this character. There was a part of me that was a little disappointed with what we did with him at the end of the episode here, where he just kind of like we've seen this kind of slow roll towards maybe the wool being pulled back from his eyes a little bit about Lumen, um, and then at the end of the episode, he's just kind of turned into this physical force that is desperately trying to stop Mark, and I was a little disappointed by that. I will say the one thing that Dan Erickson said in that interview I listened to that like kind of really, really not completely changed my opinion on this episode or anything, but like really helped me like what we did with them was he said something to the effect of like when you are like on the verge of um like in a cult of a sort and you're like on the verge of like discovering like the ways you've been lied to and the falsities of this thing, like that is the time when you are going to be most aggressively defend it because you can like feel it. You can feel the dishonesty and the reality of it kind of drip away, and that's terrifying because it's a thing you've always known. And so like in this last desperate attempt you're going to like try to hold on to it and defend it aggressively, and ultimately like that is what Milchek is doing at the very end of the episode is like he kind of knows this is all bullshit, but he's not ready to experience that yet. And so he's desperately trying to hold on to the status quo by trying to stop whatever is happening.
yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we're going to continue to see his journey. I don't know what we're doing with Cobell, man. I don't know.
Yeah,
She's decided she's on their side now. We didn't talk about that in episode 9, but when she was like, "We're allies now, so you should treat me with respect," and I was like, "Well, are you? Are
yeah,
you really allies?"
yeah. That was okay. You're pulling the points. You're pulling the negative points out of me, because I did
Yes.
feel this is one of the other false notes in this season was like the big reveal that Cobell invented Severance just fell so flat for me. I know we talked about it back when that episode happened, but I was just like, really? That was a thing that I was supposed to be wondering about. And then this was
Yeah.
supposed to again, I'll just probably repeat what I said before, but like you had to what you should have done is given me some foreshadowing going back preferably into the previous season that suggested that she was a scientist of any kind, um so that I was prepared for this, because as it was, I was just like, oh,
I mean,
she's a neuroscientist, really? Okay.
I'm gonna be honest with you, man. This is one of those things that feels like it was not in the original plan, and it's an idea they came up with after the fact. Um, Which, like, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, a lot of times that's how TV's done, right? It's
Yeah.
you kind of feel out your characters, you feel out the audience's reaction to characters, you feel how characters are vibing against each other, and you change your plans. You decide to pivot the story or redirect it. It's like a river sometimes. It's finding a new course. And that's okay, but sometimes it does result in things that just kind of ring a little hollow.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
funny. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, to me, it just, like, shrinks the world a little bit. Like, that shrinks the world for me a little bit. Like, Mark S being a unique special snowflake shrinks the world for me a little bit. I like, all of that kinda stuff does, and it bums me out a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. Um, Sometimes I feel like the way that they write this show is they kind of have their cork board covered in, cards, note cards, and the note cards are like ideas for really cool moments, character moments, or scenarios that leverage the premise in some way. You can imagine that the dinner with Bert and Fields and Irving was a note card on this cork board, and you kind of imagine that all these note cards are just at some early stage of planning for the show, for the season. They're just all on the cork board. There's 15, 20 note cards, and you imagine looking at all of these scenes and being like, yeah, these are all great ideas. All of these scenes are great ideas. Now, how do we make them all happen in the show? And then that's where the problems arise, is you have to figure out, like, okay, how do we have Mark and Mark have a conversation with each other? And then you scratch your head for a second and you say, well, we introduced this idea of the birthing cabins earlier, probably, if we're being honest, intending to use the birthing cabins as exactly this sort of thing at some point, right? Why
Mhm.
else introduce this idea, like a sort of severed floor off the severed floor, if you will? And then you're like, okay, you'll do that. How are they going to get to the birthing cabins, though? Okay, so I'm not gonna drag us through this, but it's like you work backwards in a way that feels kind of strained and ceases to be like character driven and becomes very plot driven, so
Yeah.
that you can link together these scenes. Because this is the thing, is like, I think so many scenes in this season, scenes, moments, set pieces, are just great. I just love them. Every episode has something in it that I absolutely love, but like how we got there, probably exactly the kind of thing that you're like absolutely, rolling your eyes at, because it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
that felt so clunky. And to me, I think it's not every time you point out how clunky it feels, I'm like, yeah, yep. But I love the scene that they got to, though.
Yeah.
Remember when they looked at each other. Remember when Mark said, "But I want to live with you," and then I
Yeah.
cried. I
Yeah.
don't care. I don't care how we got there. I don't care how clunky it felt. Uh,
But speaking of which, I think it is very funny. Like, I love a good heist, but the way they construct this one is like, well, first you definitely have to finish Cold Harbor. Why?
uh,
Well, because then Mark can get down to the other room because they'll be distracted because of the finishing of Cold Harbor. Oh, you,
who will be? What?
you mean like when the most important person in Lumen finishes the thing they've all been waiting for him to do, and then they're going to celebrate him directly? That that'll be his that'll be his best time to slip out.
uh,
Not like when how everyone's just been like roaming around doing whatever on the severed floor the whole time. Like,
right.
that is like we need to finish the Cold Harbor thing because we want to do that he finds her in the room with the Like, I think you're right. There's a lot of you can see a lot of the construction between the scenes and between the moments of, and this is what I think ultimately the podcast I was listening to meant about how they're solving their own problems, because it's like, how do we get from A to B and B to C and C to D? B and C, A, B, C, and D are all like awesome, but we have to get there. And the way, yeah, the way we get there is very plotty and very reliant on these ongoing mysteries of what this place is and what these people want, and the why of it and the how of it, and yeah, that is what I really push up against.
I mean, I agree. The funny thing about that, I guess, is like that has been the bane of television for ever. Like for
Yeah.
like the all serialized television has this exact issue where it's like we need this character to get out of the situation somehow. So they're gonna, karate chop the guy on the neck, and he's gonna fall unconscious. And it's like it's you always roll your eyes, and then you're like, whatever, it's TV. And then it that needed to happen so that we could get to this thing later on that's actually really cool. And then you're able to be okay with it in retrospect. This is just I don't want to say this is just a necessity of serialized writing, because I think some serialized writing definitely doesn't, fall into this trap, but
Hmm.
it's pretty rare. Uh,
Yeah,
I
I mean, I just want to acknowledge that I know, like, every complaint I'm making and everything I'm saying here could be a valid critique of Lost, a show that I deeply love and is perfect and never did anything wrong.
uh-huh,
Um, uh, that was
right.
sarcastic, but uh, I'm fully aware of that, and I feel like the prickle of my hypocrisy on the back of my neck every time I say things. I guess I will say, like, when, because I've been thinking about this like all week, and I've been trying to really drill down like to the why of it. And granted, it's been a few years since I've gone through a Lost rewatch, so I don't have Lost quite as fresh on my mind as I have this show on my mind. I think one thing I'm really pushing up against is that this is a extremely serialized television show that's pacing is kind of really strange, because we're just telling one story. And like, I think the thing that Lost had going for it, even amongst the mysteries that didn't go anywhere, and the ways the mystery boxes was getting in the way of character, I think what it had going for it is, like, from a structural and pace perspective, 99% of the time, an episode of Lost told a contained story with a beginning, middle, and end. Um, Even if there was some big question at a stinger at the end of like, what does that mean? Um, the concept of the episode as a discrete individual piece of filmmaking existed, and Severance has that occasionally. Like, I think the Ortbo is an episode with a discrete beginning, middle, and end. I also think the Miss Cobell one is as well, ironically, being like one of the worst ones in the season. Um, but I think sometimes, like, the pacing of things and how we're doing, like, and the questions we have, like, I just feel like I don't even really know where I'm going with this, but I just feel like the way we do this mystery box stuff in this kind of prestige TV, which is like an 8 to 10 episode thing, where we're telling one story over the course of 10 episodes instead of telling multiple stories that compound and compile into one story at the end of it. I don't know. Maybe it just functions for me better in one than the other.
Yeah. I mean, I think it all depends basically on your personal preferences and what you're looking for. I know I'm sort of beating that drum a lot, but like I totally recognize I'm going to focus on the thing you said about the pacing being weird, and that being, I think, part of the whole problem for you and a lot of people.
Hmm.
Um, so you said I don't remember if you said this to me. I think you said something like, well, I don't remember what exactly you said, so I'm not going to pretend that this is a quote. But basically, the sentiment was like why didn't this conversation happen at this point in time? Like when Cobell met Mark and Devin, why didn't they start talking about like their plan immediately? And I was like, well, they basically did. They just like drove an hour to the birthing facility and then had that conversation. And it's like, but it didn't feel like it. And it's like, yes, correct. It didn't feel like it because we scattered like 3 episodes between those points in time, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it leaves you with this feeling that like all this time has passed, but it's like, no, we're zigzagging around in time this season. I don't know the answer, but I feel like after let's say the Ortbo, I feel like 48 hours pass before the end of the season, you know? And I
Yeah.
could be off by a factor of 10, but I don't think I think like that's why it feels weird is we're simultaneously like having these long like tone poem episodes like Cheeky Bardo and um uh Sweet Vitriol back to back, while
Hmm.
at the same time sort of like having this sense of like dread and stakes, and like Mark is passed out on the floor dying of a brain aneurysm, and it's like that definitely. I'm saying all of this, and none of this to me is like, oh, and that's terrible. It's just like, no, I get why that would bug people though. For me, I'm just like kind of relishing the tone, the weird floaty tone of everything. I find the tone very unique and kind of worth it for its own sake. I think I don't know if this is something that I've talked about because you and I, not that we never talk about tone, obviously, but like a tone that feels unique and fresh to me is kind of its own value. Like I think of a movie, like I think of movies that I really love, like 12 Monkeys or something. I picked that one because it's like that movie's its own world. It has its own tone. It doesn't feel like anything else in that ineffable way that art feels a certain way. And Severance doesn't feel like anything else. Severance has its own weird tone. Severance doesn't feel like Lost. Severance doesn't feel like anything. Severance
Mm-mm.
just feels like Severance. And that works for me really well. So I'm like, oh, okay, we're wandering around, you know, it's more like Piranesi or something where it's like, oh, we're gonna wander down this hall now. Is this related to the plot? I don't care. This is Piranesi. It doesn't have a plot. we're following the guy wandering around. That's what we're doing. And I know that the way most people are watching the show is not like that. but that's how it works for me. This is a fun conversation because like at no point am I like you're wrong. You should be more like me and watch the show the way I'm watching it. I'm just like
Yeah.
it's just interesting to think about how differently things can land when it's really we're all watching the same show. It's just I'm taking it in a very different way for whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of tone, I think like this finale needed Rickon, and I'm really disappointed that there was no Rickon in it.
Yeah, he could have really. Yeah, Rickon injects his own interesting uh, uh, kind of comedic flavor into things. I'm not sure if you were just being sarcastic there, but like in all seriousness, there was a lack of Rickon in the season.
No,
Mm,
I was being completely serious.
okay,
Like
good. Yeah.
I think I think I mean, well, this is also like the weird thing of this kind of storytelling where we like know we have 3 seasons to do this or maybe more, and we're building to things. So we like I don't know. I like TV better when plot lines are at least semi-contained within their episode and season versus like we set up all this stuff with Rickon, we did all this thing with the book, right? And then we just kind of dropped it, and we dropped it because I'm sure we'll pick up that thread in the next season, right? Um, and I just don't like that kind of storytelling. It just bugs me.
Uh-huh.
That it's like, okay, well, if you want to find the conclusion to the Rickon arc, we'll see you in 3 years. Um, and it's like, well, why? Just because you wanted to hold on to that is the reason. And so I don't know. Like, I'm coming off as if like I really did not like the show, and that's just not true. But like, yeah, I mean, these are like the things I feel while I'm watching it is like incredibly emotionally invested in moment A, and then incredibly frustrated and annoyed in moment B. Um, and I just like I don't know where to put that
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah. I just don't think you're wrong is the thing. Like I think a writer can be really good at like, the art of pinning emotion to the page and having deep empathy and understanding of human psychology and maybe not be that good at writing a heist, you know? Like maybe they could write something that would make you just sob, but they couldn't write Ocean's 11
Hmm.
no matter how much you paid them. And you put them in a situation where you're like, you have to write Ocean's 11 but also make me sob. And it's like, dang. that's that's a tall order. I can do the second one and I'm going to try to do the first one, but I don't know if it's going to work as well. Uh and I honestly think it's like that's kind of the explanation in a lot of contexts for like writing. It's like writing is actually a big bag of a bunch of different skills. And some people are supernaturally good at some of those skills and not very good at other ones. And every once in a while you get like a really well-rounded writer who can kind of do it all. And those people
Hmm.
kind of just go on to just, sweep the table because they're just like that. That's an incredibly in demand skill set. It's very rare, obviously. Um, but that sounds like a criticism. It's more just like, yeah, this is it's honestly probably what's happening here is they don't they're not quite as good at the intricate plotty stuff as they need to be to pull off something like this
I will
completely.
say I really did love the moment of the cattle prod thing going off
Hmm.
when he transitioned from one mark to the other. That
Hmm.
was I like we haven't talked to like Gwendolyn Christie at all. Like I did enjoy her return. I do think it is, and again, like in a world where I'm not questioning any of this, and it's like, yeah, of course, Lumen has an entire department dedicated to raising goats that we will just use to bury as sacrifices when we disappear people on our severed floor. Of course, we'd have that, but like the mystery box looking into part of me is like, what? And then you have like a whole room and dedicated. You know how like they tell you never get like a gadget for your kitchen that only does like one thing.
Uh-huh.
That's how I felt. That's how I felt about Lumen right now. It's like there's a lot of one thing gadgets going
I
on in this company.
I think Lumen is meant to be pretty incompetent and terrible.
Is that true? Like I that what is hey, this is something you asked me, so I'm gonna ask it back to you.
Uh-huh.
How do how do they make money?
I have no idea. They've got a big water tower and they've got a big water drop.
Yeah. I mean they made ether at one point, right? But like
They
the
made ether.
the ether factory is closed, so they don't do that anymore.
There's been a lot of water and drowning imagery in the show.
Mhm.
They love their long loving shots of water and you've got orange and blue tetras or not tetras, sorry, fighting fish in Mark's fish tank,
Mhm.
right? It's all water and drowning. Um and Lumen is water. Or I don't
So
know.
they're just a water company?
I'm not going. I don't know. I just was. I've been wanting to say that thing about the fish. Honestly,
Mhm.
um, I think it was Jody who actually pointed that out to me. By the way, anyway, our friend Jody, who helped us with all the Kingslingers show.
Mhm.
Um, what was I saying about other things related? Oh yeah, how does Lumen make money? I have no idea. They are just a big cult. It's unclear how many employees they have. It's between 5 and 50,000. I'm fairly confident.
Uh-huh.
Um,
How many of those are severed? Because, like, I don't know. We've seen like the parking lot of this Lumen building full and like people milling about,
Yeah.
and then yet like I feel like in this season it feels like there are like 6 people that work for this company.
Yeah. I
And
don't
maybe they're all just on the severed floor in different departments doing God knows what.
I, yeah, I'm open to the idea that the severed floor is like enormous. Like to me, this is where I prefer reading this as a Borges story, because I love the
Mhm.
idea that that the severed floor is like, tens of thousands of acres of sprawling underground labyrinths
Yeah.
where there's just like there's a whole world down there. Has the show led us to think that that's true? Well, I would have said no until we saw a whole goddamn marching band, uh, of which there had been no prior evidence. So maybe, um,
Yeah. I
I don't know.
they also, like, produced, like, a work of art within 6 hours?
Uh huh.
That's pretty impressive. There's a lot of crazy shit going on down there,
Uh huh.
but we have no idea the full scope of it. And, like, look, in season 1, I was fine not knowing the full scope of it. In season 3, if we're gonna make this, like, the severed revolution, we've gotta, like, put a little bit of scope on it. What's going on down there?
Yeah. Yeah. You're not wrong. Like if we are going to get all plotty and have it be a severed revolution, I kind I mean, you're right that we probably are going to do that, but I kind of don't want us to. So
They're gonna
like,
tie up Milchek, and they're gonna say, well, I mean, what are their demands gonna be?
well, so
Like
I have a prediction that's not necessarily an answer to what you're saying, but like there's one element at the very end um of the intro title sequence. You know what it is. The very last thing that we see, very last handful of frames
the
of
little
the
Egan
intro,
baby, is that what we're talking about?
little Egan baby, and I want to abstract that and just say a baby, or actually it is an Egan baby, because we have an Egan who's probably pregnant,
Yeah,
and like pregnancy and babies and reproduction has been this huge theme and motif throughout the story
sure.
through both seasons. So like if Helly is pregnant, where do we go with that? That could be an extremely interesting premise, exploration, where it's like whose baby is this? Or and like, is the baby going to be an any baby? Like they haven't put the chip in the baby, obviously, so probably the baby is just a baby. But it is interesting to consider, like, what what could you do with severance if you literally raise someone from birth severed?
Yeah.
Then you no longer have this thing where it's like, well, obviously the Audi has, moral precedence in some like, I'm not saying like morally correct sense, but just like they would be like, look, I've been alive for like 100 times longer than you. You're just me with amnesia. There's nothing special happening here. But if you take a baby and you split their personality into two parallel streams, that is much more kind of obviously two people.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm just thinking about the directions you would go if you were going to go this way, right?
Yeah. I mean, we guessed that kind of the second they had sex the first time, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Not to distill sex down to, like, every time characters have sex, they must get pregnant, but it just I think you're right, there's so much kind of ideas circulating around that it just makes sense to be that would be exactly where we would go. Um, I don't know how I don't know how we deal with any of that,
yeah.
in this world. Yeah,
Um,
I don't know.
I don't know. I have a little tangent to go on for a second, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, my parents visited me this week, and my mom was telling me that there's this. She was telling me that the reference that Cobell makes when they drive into the birthing center is a Twilight Zone reference, which to me, I honestly, I just heard, I heard Cobell say some gibberish, and I was like, okay, this is some kind of code word. Um, but the gibberish that she says is a very straightforward reference to this Twilight Zone episode called The After Hours, which, and then me and my mom watched this episode of the Twilight Zone from 1960 in black and white. And the premise of this episode is this woman goes into a department store and she gets on the elevator looking for a particular item, and the elevator operator takes her up to the, unbeknownst to her, non-existent ninth floor. And on the ninth floor, there's only like one person there, and they're acting very strangely. And I'm going to sort of fast forward and just tell you the punchline at this point, which is we discover that the ninth floor is the floor where all the mannequins live, and the mannequins become sentient and aware when they're on the ephemeral ninth floor, and but only the mannequins can access the ninth floor. And then the twist, of course, is that the woman who we've been following around the entire show is a mannequin who wandered away from the ninth floor, and then she returns to her place, and we get the wonderful shot of the store manager doing a double take when he sees the woman who was just in there complaining yesterday is up on the pedestal as a mannequin. And then he brushes it off, of course, and goes along with his day, because this kind of thing happens in the Twilight Zone. Very like fun episode. The reason I decided it was worth it to go on this whole tangent is because of what an obvious connection to Severance this premise has.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was kind of fun to maybe bring to people who weren't aware of it.
No, that's great. I like that. But what does it mean?
I don't know, man.
So there's a moment we haven't talked about yet, which is where Helena's father shows up on the severed floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is like the cliffhanger from last episode going into this final episode. He's there, and what he tells her is that he used to see Kier in Helena, but that was lost somewhere, and then he sired many children, but didn't see Kier in any of them, but he sees him in Helly.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to make of that?
Well, I think I basically think that young Helena had this streak of defiance or something along those lines, some fire, and that was then stamped out of her through her cult indoctrination upbringing, and by wiping the slate clean and giving her amnesia, she now has that fire again, because she's.
So what are we ultimately saying about self is I guess where I was getting with this, right? Because this is something we talked about at the very beginning of the season, that the like one thing Severance is absolutely investigating is who are we and what defines who we are.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do think there's an interesting wrinkle to this whole thing with MDR being a place that creates innies. Like what? And by the way, we're making the assumption that every innie is created by the same process, right? Maybe that's a bad assumption.
Yeah.
But there's 4 of them refining macro data. So are the other 3 refining other testers, or are they just making innies? Just in general.
Yeah. So I think there have been implications that that the MDR people are special in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Unclear what exactly that means. Maybe not just anyone can be a MDR refiner. And maybe the reason, like the reason it's important is you can only make new innies at the rate that MDR can make them. So it's possible that the other 3 are sort of just day in, day out creating other severed employees, or formatting the hard drive for them, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also possible that they all have someone on their own respective testing floor, that they are someone that they know in the same way that Mark knows Gemma. I don't know. We don't have any evidence for that. I say it's possible. It's like theoretically possible, but it would actually feel kind of weird at this point to introduce that, because it would be like, oh, and then Dylan also has this estranged brother. That it's like who would that be exactly? Right, is what I mean. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I guess the implication of this whole show is that like only Mark could refine Gemma,
mhm,
right? Like,
right.
what? I don't see why. I mean, unless like he like, well, that's that. I think part of this is because I still don't understand. Like, okay, we've got this four tempers. These are things that Lumen doesn't like and wants to get like are these the well are they bad like are the tempers bad or are they just like the building blocks of who we are?
I think they're just the building blocks of who we are. I think the goal is to have them be balanced, actually.
Okay.
But actually, I don't know why I say that exactly, but that was my assumption.
Okay. So
I,
they want to balance the tempers. They want to create a fully balanced temper version of an innie, and they're testing it to make sure that there's nothing leaking from the person into the innie by putting it up against really bad thing by putting it up against really difficult things both emotionally and also just like making the innie do something terrible and then saying, "Hey, Audi, how do you feel about this right now?" So they're testing that, obviously. Mark has to refine Gemma, let's just say for reasons, right? Like
mhm.
it has to be someone that knows them very well, that understands them, that has this innate bond with them. So under that assumption, everyone else on the MBR floor, both the three main characters, but then also the three other characters that they brought in, which implies there are other macrodata refinement groups elsewhere doing similar things, must be working on people, or maybe not. Maybe they're just doing it generally, and in order to fully balance the tempers perfectly, it has to be someone that has connections, or that's what they believe, and that's why they recruited Gemma and Mark.
Yeah, or it
I don't
could
know,
be I'm
man.
just wrong
I'm
about
getting exhausted like talking about
it.
this.
I know. I don't even know why I don't even know why I developed this idea about them trying to develop even tempers. I perhaps it just seemed like a natural explanation, but like here's one question. Again, this is not the kind of thing that bothers me. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Like, there's this we have this whole thing where it's like Gemma will be killed or Gemma will die after the file is completed. And I
Mhm.
assumed that that meant like she would just instantly die as soon as the file was completed. And then I was very confused when it was like, no, no, she'll die like later. And I was like, oh, like why? Like, are they gonna execute her, or does she die as a consequence of the file being completed? Because I don't understand why they would execute her at this point. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And I was like, maybe they just maybe after you have that many innies, you've overwritten the person's personality, and they're just no longer like Gemma. Gemma is dead in the sense that Gemma Scout is dead, but Miss Casey and et cetera are now alive at her expense. Um,
Man, I don't know, cause like we see Gemma,
we
like
do.
we get
She's fine.
it's a very brief moment with Gemma, but like she seems like she's Gemma.
She
And is Miss
does.
Casey one of the 25, or are we talking about 25 other ones and also Miss Casey
Unclear.
and also Gemma? Like, do you see what I mean though? Like this stuff just like starts to spiral, and you're just like,
Well, so okay, related to this is the thing that bothered me actually, but bothered me, but not bothered me in the sense of like, and I hated it, but bothered me in the sense where I was like, wait, I no longer feel like I understand what's happening, and it was when you know Egan and that scientist guy are watching on the monitors as she's taking apart the crib, and they're like, "The barrier is holding." Yes,
yeah,
and it's like, okay, good. So like you're watching this, and you're like, so it seems like your experiment was a success. Congratulations. And then
hmm
Mark comes in, and he beckons her out, and they're like, God, no,
yeah,
no. And I'm like, why? Like, what
yeah.
different was going to happen? Like,
I,
just just kill both of them. like like what's what's happening? What's
Yeah.
happening
Well,
right now?
this is because they didn't actually explain what the fuck Lumen wants from this stuff. Like, why not? Like, why not?
Mhm.
Is that key to what the end conclusion of the show is doing? Is the reveal that, let's say, like, they're going to balance the tempers perfectly? Like, I think there is still some idea that they want to resurrect Kier, or Kier reborn or something. I still think there's some possible cloning stuff going on here, but I just don't understand, like, in the choice to reveal the big mystery of what the MDR team is doing and getting to Cold Harbor, they should have at least told us what Cold Harbor actually means, not just what's inside the room, because, like, what's inside the room I don't care about. But, like, why do they want to do this?
Yeah. What's their
It
goal?
would Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't want to give up the whole goal, like, the but, like, I totally agree with you. Some understanding of, like, what Lumen wants out of this interaction would make all these questions go away, or maybe not even go away, but just be like, I'm focusing on the scene at hand. The questions I have can wait. But the questions couldn't wait, because I was like, because I was experiencing the same thing you were experiencing, was like, I don't understand why. And then the doctor says, as the elevator is closing, stop, no, you'll kill them. And the assumption of the them in my mind there was the 25 innies of Gemma.
Yes. That was my assumption as well.
But we're gonna you're gonna kill her anyway, aren't you?
I
Like,
and to which I'm like, maybe this is actually why I thought, well, maybe they aren't. Maybe they just going to kill Gemma Scout and keep the 25 innies alive, and that was their goal. Like that,
how how do they do that?
by just keeping her in the basement forever and never,
Okay.
like, I mean, think if you, I'm going to be very like
That's playing fast and loose with the concept of she'll die, that in a way that would annoy the shit out of me. But sure, okay.
yes, and rightly so, because it's
But but to be fair though, the show has used that, right? Like,
right.
Irving didn't die, but
Yeah.
Irving B did, for all intents and
Right.
purposes, die.
So if you think it, like, it's very easy to imagine, um, within the frame of the science fiction conceit that we have, that there's like a button somewhere where, you just never let the Audi turn back on, in the same way that Irving is an innie, that the innie is never going to turn back on. Um, like, that would effectively be killing Gemma, with the caveat that it's like, okay, but you could always just like find that button and switch it off, if it existed, right? So it's not really,
Hmm.
in the same way that you could take Irving and put him in a birthing center and you could talk to Irving again.
Yeah,
It's not permanent in the same way. So,
sure.
um, which is not the impression we get from Miss Cobell when she says she will die.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I don't know if this conversation necessarily went the way I thought it was going to, but I appreciate you allowing me to, like, air my grievances a little bit here, because, like, it is like, if this was a show I didn't like as much as I did, I wouldn't get so freaking frustrated about it. But, like, it's like these moments of greatness, these moments of wonderful storytelling. And by the way, like, something that has been true the entire time is this is an immaculately shot television show.
uh-huh.
The acting is superb. All these people are doing great. Adam Scott's ability to, I heard this on another show, and I'm just going to repeat it here because it was a perfect way of describing it, and I just agree with it 100%, but I just don't want to take it as my own thought. I couldn't, like, tell you descriptively what the difference between Mark Scout and Mark S are, but Adam Scott knows it
Uh-huh.
and can act it.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you see, yep, I see it. But, like, I couldn't describe it to you. But he's got it down. He knows it.
Yeah.
And he's incredible at it. He really, really is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that I agree. I think the same is true for Helly.
Hmm.
I think, we don't get to see much of Audi Dillon, and I think John Turturro. I mean, I think both of them definitely have differences. We just don't see as much of them. But yeah, I agree with that. I think that's perfect. That's it's just a pleasure to watch. Like, it's a pleasure to
Yeah.
watch, to have your eyes on the screen. I think that's one thing that in this era of second screening, Severance is the main show that I have been watching out of all of the weird number of shows I've been watching lately, where I don't even feel like that, horrible urge to look at my phone in the first place. I'm just watching the screen attentively the entire time, because it's just engrossing. It's engrossingly shot. Everything is important. Everything you're seeing is relevant. Um, yeah, I think I think the we just had a kind of a fun, what to me was like a fun back and forth about like the ending of the season. And I don't find it, the only part of that that I find frustrating is literally just like, now we have to wait another God knows how long to find out
3 years.
the answers to these questions. But also at the same time, I'm not like furious about that fact. I for me, the payoff was that incredibly poignant moment where they're running down the hallway together, and they're doomed. And again,
Yeah.
I think the funny thing with me is, like, I feel like the season finale of season one could have been the end of the show, and I would have been fine. If you told me like, oh yeah, it didn't get renewed, I would have been like, oh well, that was a great ending. And frankly, I kind of feel the same way about the ending of season two, where I feel like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a, in some ways, a uh, postmodern ending, but it's an ending like, yeah, we left some mysteries hanging, obviously, but the idea of ending the show on Helly and Mark running down the hall, doomed and essentially hopeless, but just carving out this one last moment of time together before the darkness closes in, um, is incredibly beautiful, and that to me would be like an excellent ending image for Severance to end on. I know it's not going to be. I'm just saying that to me is what the payoff was for for
I,
the season. So,
I totally agree. And I think the one encouraging thing I can say is the fact that they've done that 2 seasons in a row
mhm.
makes me think that when it comes actually time to end the show, they will end it on an image and a feeling that, like, you're like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm happy for this to be the ending of the show as well, and for it to be real this time.
yeah. I think honestly, I just hope that they do have the attitude of like, we got to end it. We got to end it. We got to, like, we got to bring this thing to the finish line and then end it, because I totally agree. Even I, with my infinite Buddha-like patience, will eventually get frustrated with the endless mystery box bullshit. If it's clear that they're just going to keep kicking the can down the road, I
Yeah.
will lose patience eventually. So,
I do wonder how we might be having very similar conversations about the television show From here
mhm.
relatively soon. Like, I think there's this weird thing, and I'm not spoiling anything about From for you, but I'm bringing this up specifically because I think there's this weird thing with these mystery box shows where when you know you're watching season one of something, you're kind of just like, yeah, whatever. I don't need to know, whatever. And every little crumb the show gives you is like a delicious morsel. You're just like, "Yum, yum, 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 yum."
Yeah,
I love it. And then when you move into the sophomore season, the expectations change a little bit. You're like, all right, season two, it's time. It's time to hop on the mystery box train. We need to rip this thing into high gear a little bit here. Um, and that continues to shift over the course of the show. So, we're on the verge of making it into season two of From, and I'm going to be entirely honest with you. My memory of season two of From is very spotty, so I am not saying this from any point of like knowledge or spoilers for you, but I do wonder if we're going to be having a very similar conversation where we're like, come on, man. Come on, come on.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. We'll see. It's a very different show. It's a very different kind of show. It just also is a mystery box show. So I don't know.
Yeah, we will see, right? I think once again, it's likely to depend on how much I care about the characters at that specific point in time.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. It's very true. One thing is for sure is I will be there for season 3 of Severance, no matter what. I am. I guess the big thing I'll say at the end of this thing is I am just not like when I finished season 1 of Severance, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm more now. Do it. The way I am right now with this show is I will definitely watch season 3 when it comes out. I am not like waiting with bated breath.
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. I again totally understand your feelings there. I think I have a very kind of contented attitude about where we left off. I'm not going
I'll
to
see what
repeat
you tell us.
myself and say what I just said, but I'm just like, yeah, it'll come around when it comes around. It'll- uh, that's not to say I'm not excited to watch it when it comes, but I'm not going to be like on the subreddits for the next 3 years.
How do I be
Um,
you? I think I'm just gonna go watch the pilot of
well,
Lost again.
well, there's this podcast that I like called the Doofcast, where they try to espouse this ethos of liking things, and normally they both do a really good job at it, but
Oh, you son of a bitch! We're in a
anyway,
fight.
try to be more like them is what I'm saying.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay.
All right. That is. Anything else you wanted to say about
No,
Severance?
I think that
We went
was
on
all
for
of
quite
my
a while today, so
yeah. I wanted to make sure I talked about that Twilight Zone thing because I thought that was kind of fun. The
yeah,
gold specific thing she says is I'm looking for a gold thimble, and that's what the woman is looking for when she goes into the department store. By the way,
that's fun. That's
yeah,
really fun.
yeah.
And your mom just like had that on the memory file. She was like,
Gosh,
"Oh yeah, Twilight Zone."
I don't actually know where she came across this, but it was fun to watch the episode together. Regardless,
Cool, cool. All right, so that is season 2 of Severance. If you have any opinions on it, which I'm sure you do, please feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on Twitter at doofmedia, Instagram at doofmedia, subreddit, reddit.com/doofmedia /r/doofmedia. I'm interested to get people's feedback on this because I think there's a lot of people that are more positive on that are closer to your end of the spectrum than mine, at least amongst our listeners on the show. Um, but I think there are also some people that are feeling my frustration. So I think the community is a little split on this one. I think that's fine. You know, I think
yeah.
that's just interested to hear what people thought, not only of this last episode, which again I think was very good, but the season as a whole, which I think was, you know, television.
It definitely had some bright spots.
No, for sure, for sure.
We'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to the Doofcast if you haven't done so. You can find us on any available podcasting platform.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and pledge at any of the available levels. That's where you can find that podcast on From that we were referencing a little bit earlier in the show. And also, that's where you can find votes for book club. We are not having a vote for book club this month because it is going to be our We Pick 'em. We try to do this at least once a year where we don't let you guys vote. We just pick the book ourselves. We'll be announcing what the book for April will be at our episode for March, which is today, as you're listening, this the 29th of March, or 28th. It's past midnight here, so my clock moved over. The 28th of March, where we'll be reading A Canticle for Leibowitz at 9:30 p.m. Central Time over on our YouTube channel. So if you want to see what next month's book is and talk about this month's book, something that I liked, I don't know. I was trying to compare, like, is this going to be a more positive conversation than me on the Severance conversation? I think so. I think so.
I think it will be, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, patreon.com/Doof Media. You can participate in the votes for book club and everything else, and you can help support us, and we would definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, speaking of supporting us, an easy way to support us is to give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Each review really does help us out. draws more attention to the show. So please go check that out if you haven't yet.
Yeah, and if you somehow don't know about it, we have another podcast. Have we talked about Flanagan's Wake on here ever?
Not. I don't know. Not in a minute, probably.
We have another podcast going through the films of Mike Flanagan and the adaptations that he based some of those films on. And next week's episode is going to be on Gerald's Game, the movie Gerald's Game. So I know we've talked about Gerald's Game before. I think that was on a Patreon episode only. But if you like us talking about movies, especially when we both really like the movie, please check out Flanagan's Wake, because I think our Gerald's Game conversation is going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
That's available wherever there are podcasts. All right. Next week, I think, Matt, we are finally finishing our Oscar series. I think that's what we're doing next week. We've got one final Best Picture nominee. It'll be I'm Still Here, a Brazilian film that I watched, but I'll probably have to watch again because it was a few weeks ago now. But we'll wrap up Oscars next week, and then we'll move on to something new.
Sounds good.
All right. We will see you.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.